All right, here we go. Hey guys, I'm Sarah West. So I just wanted to start by giving a little background about myself. So I'm a painter primarily from Columbus, Georgia, and I've always kind of been interested in figuring out ways to depict the spiritual and ideas about transformation. And so I'm starting with this painting, not mine, but Giovanni di Paolo, because it was kind of a launching point for me for this series that I've been working on the past 9 years. So I received a BA initially at Wake Forest, studied art there, and decided to pursue an MFA. And before that, kind of had to supplement some of my classes. And so I took a year of classes at School of the Art Institute of Chicago. And while I was there, I got to see this painting a good bit. It's part of a series from an altarpiece for John the Baptist. And so the title is St. John the Baptist Retiring to the Desert, and it was painted in 1455. And it has, the one panel, but it shows John the Baptist twice within the same frame. So I guess when I first encountered this work, didn't know a ton about, I'd always been interested in art history, but didn't know a ton about this particular time period. And so I think what captured my attention was how contemporary this felt. And so I really loved, the limited color palette, and then this just kind of stilted sense of space. And it even kind of recalls like early video games in a lot of ways. There were just a lot of kind of layers happening that I really couldn't even understand at the moment, but I kept thinking about this painting throughout grad school, basically. And so the more I focused on it, I started to realize you have these like Byzantine symbols, medieval symbols that are coming together and merging with the beginnings of linear perspective and like this sense of space that's being created. And so to me, that kind of conflation of 2D and 3D space was what felt really contemporary. And so that really mimics the way that I think contemporary culture goes through life, because we're constantly mediated, be it through looking at screens, out in public spaces, or looking at them like on our phones, and having these kind of moments of physical space and our bodily experience being interrupted by this like flat abstraction. Additionally, with this time period, I was kind of looking for a way to talk about religious and spiritual themes. And so the narratives from these paintings kind of offered a way to talk about that without being, I don't know, it's just a very tenuous landscape, I think, especially if you don't work in non-figurative abstraction. So for me, it was a really cool framework and like launching point, I guess, to pursue all kinds of different aesthetic avenues, really, and thematic avenues. So like I said, I've kind of been working in this mode for the past 9 years. And so I guess part of my thinking was I like in incorporating kind of technology and digital technology alongside early Renaissance painting. I like that they can kind of both address like a dream space or an ideal space, and speak to the non-physical and like the spiritual world, and talk about like these two types of spaces coexisting. So I'm kind of aligning these Renaissance compositions within my own paintings alongside a lot of like personal kind of digital ephemera, if you will. So then each painting is kind of a new opportunity to talk about sometimes things that are more personal and sometimes themes more universal. And I think kind of depending where I'm at in life, that's evolved and sort of how comfortable I've felt getting into the personal. But as far as technique goes, I think, as you can see, I like to blend figurative style with abstract. And I like sort of the tension that creates, where you have these moments of illusion and then moments of flatness working against each other, because I feel like there's these questions, it kind of engages the viewer, and it's not an easy read. It kind of forces the viewer to kind of consider what world are they entering into, and that might change depending on kind of where they are moving through the painting. And I also kind of want to strike a balance between fast and slow. And so slow in the sense that I have to kind of laboriously build up these layers. It's an oil painting. I have to really deliberately mix each color and whatnot. And there's like some really tight figurative moments, but then fast kind of comes from a lot of the ways that I'm putting these sketches together and some of the kind of improvisational mark making that happens both on the screen when I make these compositions and on the canvas when I'm then kind of working with the rules I've given myself, I guess. So they often have a lot of layers. So this painting is titled An Elegy, a Seed, and it was from a show I had this past fall at Sanford. And so it was from the start of the pandemic, and I was looking for kind of a way to talk about shared isolation. And so this painting is referencing Starnina's painting of the Thebaid, and it was from 1410. So you have these scenes from the life of a saint, and it features a bunch of different hermetic scenes, a bunch of different chapels, and there are moments of community, but a lot of this idea, like I said, of shared isolation that I felt like kind of spoke to what I was experiencing at that moment. And also, I was thinking a lot about like cultivating life and the sense of urgency. And so you have this kind of like bubble pod, like hotel kind of space, like dream space, and then these domestic like attempts to cultivate life, and then a Zoom meeting happening too, like all kind of intersecting. And so I kind of felt like this was a way to talk about like commemorating that time of chaos and like trying to create order out of what felt like a chaotic time. And this was one of the first times too, I was kind of experimenting with painting on frames and like borders and kind of how borders can cause us to think more of the object of the painting. And just, I don't know, I'm still kind of working through that, but exploring some of those ideas a little bit more. The next painting, it's also from that show, so done within the past year, The Brightest Flame, the Deepest Black. So it's oil on paper. And in this one, I was referencing Fra Angelico's painting Noli Me Tangere. So this is pretty small, 11 by 9.5. And so that is a Latin phrase. It means touch me not. And this is a scene of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And so it's what Jesus told Mary Magdalene, do not touch me, because you're to be thinking of your faith must be in the spiritual world and in the invisible and not just in the physical world. So again, to me, it was kind of like humorously evocative of the moment of kind of living through the pandemic and literally not being able to touch people, but also kind of being forced to think about things that are invisible. So not just spirits, but germs and the future. And so and the unknown. So I used this kind of shell motif that you'll see like as kind of a border. It's from an emoji. And for a lot of times I work intuitively and then kind of go back and recognize what was happening in my brain. And so I think, it obviously echoes the tomb in that it's like this hole in this cavernous space. But it's also, I think, speaking to this idea of the unknown and the invisible, because there's this black, unknowable space within. So I like that as a sort of metaphor for talking about the spiritual. That's something that's real and present, but simultaneously not totally knowable. The next painting I'll talk about, this one is a larger one, 48 by 36, Thin Spaces, also from that show. And so, hold on a second. With this one, I was referencing the Coronation of the Virgin by Gentile da Fabriano, which you see kind of in the center. So depending on the painting, I mean, sometimes my references are a lot more explicit and sometimes they become more scattered and dispersed and painted over. But it's often kind of the starting point, I guess, for the final product, regardless of kind of how much physical real estate it ends up occupying. So this painting, I was kind of playing with repetition, both as a form of meditation and as a way of creating space. And it also, I think, relates to digital space because you have this opportunity to copy and paste. And for me, let's see, we'll talk about this painting. This was kind of an earlier painting I did, 2016, where you see a lot of repetition. I was really captivated by the idea of the digital sublime, and that we get that sense from in digital space from this kind of possibility of things proliferating and generating without our total control over them. Of course, there's coders, and we might author these programs, but there's something to me that's really fascinating in that, because it's kind of our new form, I guess, of commonly experiencing this idea of the sublime that, was talked about in the Hudson River School, like the landscape paintings, but now it just occupies a wholly different kind of space. And then going back to this one, this is thin spaces. So that was kind of thinking about these physical locales where the barrier between the physical and spiritual is permeable or thin. So I was kind of wanting to depict Mary as this like physical vessel for the divine, and then also present this idea of like spaces intermingling and merging in the same space. This next painting, Constellation, another older piece, but I included it in the show Syzygies at Stanford just because I felt like it touched on a lot of the same themes that I was kind of being confronted with in the pandemic work. So with this one, I wanted to kind of use linear perspective as the main mode of unifying these spaces, where you have this central vanishing point, and then I guess complicating that with some of the flatness from wiping out or like painting over with white a lot of the information, the visual information. So you just end up having all of these kind of competing narratives, competing forms, and in some ways competing spaces that are happening at the same time. And I guess it, speaks to synchronicity, but I was also wanting to incorporate some like snapshot, I guess, type imagery and screenshots of my own, because something I feel like I'm constantly contending with is in wanting to talk about digital space. It's all well and good to address these symbols or platforms, but then at a certain point, it can feel like you're kind of erasing the self. And so I wanted to include these sort of like more personal snapshots, I guess, into these spaces. So that's something I'm kind of constantly contending with a bit, because I want it to have a universal read and like have lots of people feel like they can engage with it. But also, I do think I really respond to art where you can get a sense of the person making it. And next, I will talk about this hand series. I haven't really figured out a good title for this series, but that's what I'm calling it. And I have 3 of these paintings in the show, Hand to Heart. So they're all oil on panel, 14 by 11. And each one of them, I'm kind of touching on the idea of alchemy. And I'll show you a reference for that painting specifically, St. Martin. So those are his like prayer hands when he is being knighted from a fresco. So each painting has a early Renaissance reference that the hand is coming from. And then it's also depicting a semi-precious stone that the hand is kind of pressing into or on top of in some cases. And then a hardware of some sort that's like a motherboard or circuit board. And so my thinking was, I really wanted to do something with this idea of the intimacy of our hands along with our smartphones specifically, And so the scale of these is smaller to kind of address the object and make the viewer kind of recognize them more as an object, and to feel more intimate. And I was thinking about sort of the origins of alchemy and how, they had a lot of spiritual implications. So alchemy, if you don't know, is the process of transmuting semi-precious stones or rocks into gold, or that attempt, I guess. And you can obviously use that term to apply to so many things now, like as a metaphor. But with our phones, something that was interesting to me is that the circuit boards are actually made of silicon, which comes from quartz. So that's a rock. And then too, with painting, the pigments come from rocks. And so this sort of dialogue that was happening, I really wanted to figure out a way to address that yearning and that kind of desire for something ideal, something purifying. That was another thought behind alchemy, something that connected the person orchestrating the alchemy with God, as like an author of life, and someone that can make something better. And I feel like that's a lot of kind of our relationship, whether we're conscious of it or not, with our phones and with just digital devices in general, where we're ascribing them with so much psychological power and pouring our dream lives into them in a lot of ways. And not saying that in a sacrilegious way, but for me, I feel like this sort of unmet longing is just really worth tapping into, because it's kind of a constant, regardless of the time period we find ourselves in. So there are different stones, as you can see: opal, labradorite, sodalite, and then malachite. And this one's in the show as well. Yeah. This is the Dirk Boots reference for this painting in Jasper. And then I have two more I'll talk about. This one is called Sun Shining on the Multiverse. So I was kind of trying to create a plot or diagram, or like sticker sheet was how I started thinking about it, of some of my symbols that I connected with the past year, about healing and death and the possibility of birth and destruction. I mean, there was just so much, I guess, between the virus and then social upheaval and climate change, as everybody knows. But this was kind of a way, I guess, for me to bring all of these things together. I think by creating like a similar hierarchy of scale of these forms, it felt like it enabled me to better process or like create a dream space of it that was somehow therapeutic. Again, like I mentioned, the possibility of rebirth was kind of a theme that I kept returning to in garden imagery. There's also an image of a black hole, and this is just a quote that I thought was really interesting. A black hole isn't really a hole, it's an object in space with incredible mass packed into a very small area. All that mass creates such a huge gravitational tug that nothing can escape a black hole, including light. So the black spot that you're seeing is the shadow, and then the ring is from the gas, that's surrounding it. And so astrophysicists had said, we've seen the unseeable. And that's just, again, like I'd mentioned, something visualizing what's unseeable and unknowable is just a constant like source of fascination for me. And then this idea that that's an image from the past is also really fascinating. So it's a lot of things happening. You have Beatrice from Dante's Inferno and unicorns, and there's a lot of things happening in the same painting. And then this painting is also in the show Hand to Heart. It's called Pneuma Space. So this one was based on a book of hours, so an illuminated manuscript, and it was from the book of Genesis, and it's God creating all the animals. And so again, you have this kind of funky, wonky sense of space and objects where the animals are like massive, and then the landscape is very disproportionate, but it denotes, the importance of the narrative, what's important in the narrative. So yeah, it was really, there's something so magical feeling about that to me that I don't know, I could look at these paintings like all day. And so I wanted to, I guess, interject myself into that space. And like I said, I guess recently I've just been thinking a lot about gardens, and this is sort of the ideal garden, Eden, as this kind of potential for healing and potential for what's to come, and a way of like mental repose and meditation, I guess, is thinking about gardens. And so this border is actually from a meditation garden game that I have on my phone. It's the control button alongside like flowers from that game. So I kind of made my own border, even though the borders definitely evoke illuminated manuscripts as well. And then I have this kind of sun in the center, and it's definitely like a cold artificial kind of sun, which is meant to feel, I guess, synthetic and digital. And I think like in showing these overt digital images, it's like my way of kind of transposing myself and my time and space into these scenes, and creating that kind of collision, but also harmony. And so also I was thinking about with this painting, like when you have these moments of the abstract becoming figurative, or like the non-figurative, I guess I should say, becoming figurative, and becoming described, and how that kind of speaks to generation and the origin of forms. And that's so much about like the history of painting, but that's just something that feels very special and magical to me, I guess, about the process of painting. So the title pneuma space is from this idea. It's like an ancient Greek term, pneuma, that means breath, but it's like more specifically used in a religious context to describe the soul or the spirit, also like a life force. And so it's a force from the original soul of God that's being imparted onto these different forms and kind of organizing and bringing life to the world. So I just love that idea. Yeah, and so that's it for me, but thank you all for listening to all my thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah. Who's going next? I can't remember now.
I'm going next.
Okay.
Sarah, that was just lovely. A hard act to follow. So I'm Renee Hennen-Plata, and I'm going to kind of break my talk into two different points, two different parts. First, start really looking at the process and being in the studio, and then the actual piece itself in the gallery. So there's been over a 25-year lapse between when I was a painter in New York and being in this wonderful space with these wonderful artists and having this opportunity. So when I was a young painter and I was working on my BFA at the Atlanta College of Art, I had the opportunity to spend a day with Philip Guston. And it was a small school, so we sat around with him for an entire day, and he spoke to us as only Philip Guston could speak to us. And that day basically has changed or guided me as a painter until really now. So he spoke so honestly, and he had such an understanding of painting. And he did come into my studio and sit with me for about 30 minutes. And one of the things that he said to me was, "Oh, yes, my favorite breakfast is a bagel with a big smear of cream cheese on it. And I just love to smear that cream cheese around my bagel, and how he related to smearing cream cheese was so much as how he approached life and a canvas, and that he could look at my painting and think of cream cheese and a smear, you know, just so much related to me. So I have a 2-minute video of Philip Guston, because I really feel like what he says in this 2-minute time is more than I can say in a lifetime. I'll kind of go through some of the things that he does say after, but only Philip Guston can say it like he's going to say it. And he's really talking about process, but he's talking about his art, and art very much on the basis of where I'm pulling from. So here we go. We'll let Philip do the talking here.
Destruction of paintings is very interesting to me and almost crucial. Sometimes I find that what I've destroyed 5 years ago, I'll paint now, as if when the thing first appears, you're not ready to accept it either, you know? There's some mysterious process at work here which I don't even want to understand. I know that if I stopped painting and became a psychologist of the process of making, I would probably understand it more, but it wouldn't do me any good. I don't want to understand it like that, analytically. But I know that there's some working out that takes place in time, but it's not given to me to completely understand it. It's illegal. The first thing always looks good, and then you start doubting it, you know? Well, I started this painting a few days ago. It went all right. It was almost finished in, I don't know, a day. But I came in later that night, and, well, I liked the left part, didn't like the right part. So I started changing the right part. Something happened which felt better to me than the left part. So then I changed the left part, and before I knew it, the whole painting vanished. The painting that was almost finished here didn't look bad. It looked all right. But it looked almost too good. It's as if I hadn't experienced anything with it. It was too much of a painting. I don't mean that I need to struggle always with it. I don't mean that exactly. But it felt to me as if it were additions, this and that and that and that. Whereas what I'm always seeking is some great simplicity where the whole thing is just there and can't be this and that and that and that.
So are we back? Okay. So just to kind of highlight some of the things that Guston was talking about that means so much to me and my process is the not ready to see it. You know, the ability to, you know, the whole process of painting and discovery and what am I seeing, and is it beyond my concept of being able to see? Because you're looking at abstract painting, you're looking at a new language, a vision that you are discovering and beginning to format. Very much, you know, I work with children and special needs children, and being able to accept or to see beauty in that imperfection, and that development of a new language, of stringing one word, two words, three words together. So when he talks about also, you know, welcoming, not understanding, that it's almost sacrilege to understand everything that the painting is doing or offering at that time, speaks to like the willingness to be vulnerable while you're a painter, really to put yourself out on the line. And you know, working, well, I have to go back to working with kids with autism, is, you know, being able to join them and to see the world and to accept these children as a beauty of life, and seeing the world through their eyes. So being an abstract painter, it's really that relationship that you have with the canvas at the time, and to let go of some of the things that you think a painter should be, or what a painting should be, where he talks about the painting looked too good. It was too much a painting. It's after you paint for a while, and even when you have a lapse and you start painting again and you start painting, you know, you learn how to make a painting. And there's a point that the painting is just a painting, and it's too much a painting. And it's not really provoking or asking questions or allowing you to be vulnerable or seeing where it's taking you. That interrelationship, that conversation that you have with the canvas has to be basically ongoing. The willingness to kind of let go of purpose, of your social and historical concepts, and once again find that beauty in the imperfection. Matisse said, which I have like my little notes, to look at something as though you had never seen it requires great courage. And I think that's kind of the essence of what you're looking for in, as a painter, as an abstract painter, even as a therapist working with a child with autism, is really being able to see them and to accept and to look at that canvas and to accept it and let go of what your understandings are and to have that moment. Guston talks about the great simplicity, where you see the whole thing at one time. Ornette Newman, who I have been reading a lot about and thinking a lot about, talks about this also. He talks about creating the whole totality, where you're seeing the beginning and the end all at one time. Very much in the sense of how I look at this piece, and which kind of moves me into the piece and the show and showing. You know, I cherish my privacy, and even though I have like this open space at ground floor, it's kind of like coming out in your underwear to paint and to put your piece out is like.
Mm-hmm. She's frozen. Is she frozen for you guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Give her a minute. She'll come back. This is our first frozen during an artist talk. It's not a bad record. Well, she dropped off, I think. Okay. Well, let's
You think she'll try to reboot in?
Yeah, we could just give her a minute, I think, rather than move on to you, Patty, because she'll come back in. I could stop the share. Let me see if she's down there. No. Okay. I wish I had taken photos of, or added, I took some photos of Renee's studio, and I wish I had added them on here because
Yeah.
it's really interesting to see her space. She's working on so many paintings all at the same time, and they're all like almost exactly the same. So, well, you want to jump?
I'd like to say about Renee's studio, which I think relates to what she was talking about, is she paints and repaints her surfaces and they change. So every time I come into the studio, there's the pieces that have a similar feel to them and they look very similar, but they look so different each time. She's working with another layer of color, like a dark color over a light color over a dark color, and the texture, or there's no texture. And it just, there's subtle little changes, but they're so big and dramatic when you come in again. And so I think that kind of relates to what she was talking about with, or the idea of letting a painting be a painting, or not, it's too painterly or too much like painting. Okay, so sorry, that's my thoughts there.
No, Miriam, that was great. Thank you for doing that.
Jennifer,
Yeah.
I'm in her studio.
Oh, you want to? Yeah. Great. Here, let me.
Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. I can't tell. Oh, now I can see. Okay, so here we go. Here's her studio.
Mm-hmm.
I love this chair too. The stool combo.
Yeah, and I like her approach to working very small and making sketches and then working out really big too.
Yeah. This is sort of like going through someone's purse or something. I don't feel
Sorry, I'm back.
Yes. Yay. There we go. Awesome.
Okay, sorry, my computer died. I guess I should have considered that. Anyway, I guess where I was basically, you know, I had a bit of resistance as far as showing my work because I really cherish that privacy and not really bringing things out and talking about them and what does it all mean, and you know, can I just paint after all these years? But I have to say, you know, bringing these pieces out and putting them in such a lovely space, it really was an awakening for me, as far as the art making just didn't take place in the studio. It became part of this piece within this space. And it wasn't just my conversation with the canvas. It then became a conversation of the viewer or the visitor with the piece that I had created. And so, you know, what became very interesting to me was one, how much the piece kind of hogged space and how much space it really required and it needed. I think, you know, placing it on the floor brought a lot of questions into mind. The lean itself, looking, you know, it really took the first step towards the viewer. It almost invaded a bit of their space. So it wasn't removed and kind of placed, you know, nicely on a wall. It was in their footsteps. You know, as soon as you walked into the gallery, it approached you. The large image approached you. The step it took on the floor approached you. And so it brought basic questions of, you know, let's see what my questions were. You know, did I see it? As I saw, you know, as soon as I walked in, is that enough? I saw it. Oh, look at it. There it is. Do I approach it? Do I need to see more? You know, is it leaning? Is that it questioned a little bit of time? Is it non-permanent? Is it coming? Is it going? You know, the space between the viewer and the piece became part of the piece itself. So I found that to be very, very interesting and something that opened another door to be able to consider, because like in my own space, there is a conversation between the paintings that I'm doing. And there is an interaction between me and the painting and the paintings that are still up in my studio. Now there began to be an element of a spatial relationship and a conversation between the viewer and the piece and that space in between. So originally there was the books were supposed to go underneath the painting and to lift them up a bit so that it, as I am a short person, I like to wear heels in places that there are other people. And I thought, well, this painting is a little too short like me to be in such a space. So we put the books under the piece, and both Sarahs were there, and we looked at it and we went, that's not right. And let's turn the books. And we turned the books, and it's like, nah, I'm just going to pull the books out and just put them over here. Let's just look at the piece. And it was an incredible, wonderful, magical moment that I shared with Sarahs, both Sarahs. At that moment, it was really the magic of making art within the space itself with two wonderful artists, and we saw it. And by leaving the books there and in the way that they were stacked originally, was the magic that we kind of are always searching for when we're making art. And without this opportunity of showing in this wonderful space with these wonderful artists, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So, you know, I think that I really am thankful for having this opportunity and to be able to think about showing my work in the future and what the benefit would be of how far that might take my art to go. And to both Sarah's and Patty B, I know you weren't there at the moment, but you've created a lot of magic for me to thank you. And that's it. Sorry about the break.
Oh, that's okay. All right, Patty B, you want to go ahead?
Hi, guys. Okay, I'm going to try the screen share. Here we go. Let's see.
Are you frozen, Patty B? Yeah, she's frozen. Tara, will you get off? Okay. This is our first Wi-Fi hiccup in an artist talk. I'm so surprised at how well our track record has been until now. There you go. You're back. Try again.
Glitched?
Yeah.
You frozen? Okay.
Yeah, we didn't get anything from you.
You didn't. Okay.
No.
All right. Here we go. There. We good?
Yep. Great.
Awesome. Okay. I'll be fast. That was so cool just hearing both of your talks, Sarah and Renee, because there's so much that I'm pulling from that. And the Philip Guston piece is fascinating. This painting was an experimental thing for me. So this is kind of as wild as I get, because normally I'm a very tight realist painter. The background, this is painted on a true gesso panel, and it's a egg tempera stenciled piece that I did maybe 4 years ago, and it's been sitting around my studio and just felt right during this past year that it was time for me to tackle this. And I've called this Theorem Painting 1. I spent some time in New England and New Hampshire in August, and I've been interested in theorems, and I don't know if y'all know about theorem painting. It's a tradition, 19th century stencil painting that was basically done by formula that young girls were taught how to paint by given stencil kits, and they were often painted on velvet, which I think is kind of interesting, just thinking about our bias towards velvet painting, and maybe that stems from these. So these are two examples of traditional theorem paintings. And I've always been interested in still life just as the lowest genre, that women were pretty much, that was the realm of painting that they were allowed to do during the Renaissance, and that is kind of at the bottom of the barrel of the painting hierarchy. And I like experimenting with this, and just going forward, I just want to push the boundaries of what still life can do. So these are these examples that I think are just wild. They kind of float in space. They're formulaic, and just knowing that that's where girls were limited to kind of stop their advancement in art. You know, they weren't allowed to do academic painting. I'd also been, during the pandemic, I read the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which is an 1892 story that she wrote as an early feminist essay about a woman that was not allowed to work, and because of her fits of hysteria, and she was kept in the nursery of a house, and she was just meant to rest and was not allowed to write. She was a writer. So she basically loses her mind and starts being affected by the pattern of the wallpaper, and like becomes one with the wallpaper, and is kind of taken over by her, like a domestic entrapments. Anyway, so I got interested in doing stenciling, and the stencil that's going on is from kudzu photographs, because this is a painting of kudzu, the kudzu bloom that I did in 2018. I was using kudzu as a metaphor for women and symbol of aggressive resistance and perseverance. Kind of in love with kudzu. So I cut stencils and made this piece, and but then I wanted to mix it with a hyper real piece of silver, and use this playing with these fields, these depth of fields and perspectives, and playing with the picture plane about where it stops and starts. And Sarah, I found it fascinating what you were talking about the Renaissance pieces, because there's more that I'm going to show in a little bit, but just where things almost look like they're decoupaged and like floating into space. And I was thinking about that a lot as far as the pandemic and being at home, and this sense of suspended time, and just these ideas of floating, kind of not knowing where you are, the difference between from day to day. So this piece, I worked my self-portrait into this sugar dish that was my mother-in-law's, and I've been interested in working with the idea of the mirror and reflection, and bouncing the gaze back from the viewer back to the painting and back to the viewer. I was working with water gilding in my Agatha series, trying to kind of create a physical convex mirror that would literally bounce the viewer's image back and forth between the piece. So this time I worked myself into it, and just kind of, I was thinking about Van Eyck's portrait of Arnolfini and the traditional use of the mirror. And I just think it's a really interesting thing about how to activate participation of the viewer into the painting. Then I also, this was the second part of this show for me. I included this. Sarah inspired me to rush the production of the second hand, and I'm working on a line of door knockers that are all inspired by women in history. This is my hand, and this other one is my friend Catherine's. And going back to Fra Angelico, which is so interesting, Sarah, you talk about that. This is from San Marco, and I was there in 2016. Just became obsessed with his frescoes and this very surreal, modern floating of objects and hands. And I've been wanting to do this. I've been and also interested in Japanese still life, which has a lot of negative space and floating objects. So I've been waiting to do this, to superimpose oil hyperreal painting on top of frescoes. And so that's what this painting is about, referencing these. And that door knocker was just cast in bronze. That's a detail. That's my hand. And then back to this. Okay, have I questions? Did I leave anything out?
We can start the questions now if you want to, if you want to, and kind of stay on Patty B first, since she got her screen up still. I was wondering about your process in the bronzing and the casting. If you could talk a little bit about that and how that's done.
Let's see, let's just stare at that one. So this starts out, this one in particular is a life cast. So I did a alginate mold of Catherine's hand and molded and sculpted the jewelry and then applied it. So after making that alginate mold, I poured hot wax and then used that wax and then worked up the sculpture around it, made a mold out of that, out of silicone. And then I'm pouring wax it. So I've had to make a 2-part mold out of silicone. And that's where it gets really tedious, like figuring out how to make this really thin and the amount of time that the wax pours and hollowing it out and things like that. Then I come back and chase the wax. And when I get the wax perfect, I send it off to my foundry. I'm working with Birmingham Sculpture, John Stewart Jackson and Joe McCrary out at the Thomas Project at Wade Sand and Gravel. So what they'll do next is, with my waxes, they'll do a ceramic shell over the wax, and then it gets cast out of whatever metal I choose. So I'm working in brass, which not many people do. I decided to do this after I kind of did a research trip to Paris and documented a lot of door knockers and pulls, and everything there is pretty much in brass. And I kept on trying to figure out how to make bronze shiny gold, but realized I should just cast in brass. So it's really exciting. So I've had 6 knockers ready to go. All the others are sculpted like from scratch, but these hand ones are molded or, cast from life.
I have a question, Patty B. Ultimately, do you, in a gallery, you're not supposed to touch. And these are, one of the things that just talking to you for a little while is that sense of multi-sensory that comes with it, the sound that a door knocker makes, the feel of the door knocker. the vision of the door knocker. I guess the only thing is there's no smell, but
True. How could we work? Maybe we could have a little cozy inside.
right, exactly.
But you're right, Renee. That's exactly.
Talk a little bit about, like, you know, what's the ultimate home for these? You know, is it a gallery? Is it, you know, do you want people to be able to have all that relationship with the door knocker, or do you like that it's a door knocker but yet no, don't touch me? You know, talk a little
Full
bit
on touch. I'm hoping these will be on people's front doors and absolutely going to work. I love the idea that the door knocker is the first thing that you encounter when you approach someone's private space, and that I want them to be like symbols of who is inside the home, or that other space on the other side of the door. And I love that it's auditory and sensory and tactile, you know, it's just all of that. I just think and that's why I'm excited for all of these. I think I hope people are going to maybe relate to the knocker that they choose, and each one has a different story behind them. So I hope that I'm going to do a limited edition of each one, and I don't see them really in a gallery at all. They'll be shown at AMW, and I am going to rig these up so they'll be blocked in the back with a door strike, so they can go to action and will be used there. And I haven't worked that out about how much noise comes from what weight and things like that, but that will happen in the future.
Great.
Miriam's got a question.
Yeah, it's more of a comment, and it's for all three artists. I know we're supposed to start with Patty, but I just kind of wanted to give my thoughts on all three of you guys, your work in this show. It really excites me how much each show that seems to come out recently has been, all the artists have had these great connections. And the one that I'm seeing within your group is the looking at art history of various types. All of you guys are looking at art history, but then you're also looking at your own art history within that connection, and you sharing, all of you were sharing your own past works and past ways of working and history. So that was just my comment for all of you.
I have a question for Patty B.
Hey, Bevan.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I know you've had this concept of the knockers for a while. I think they have turned out great. I can't wait to put my hand on one. But is there a relationship between the two knockers and the painting?
Well, there's definitely a love of metal and reflection. And, you know, I pretty much paint silver in almost every painting that I do. So I do think those overlap. I think that's the connection, and maybe I'll start painting some door knockers. I'm sketching them for sure. You know, these are both prototypes. This one's going to be a little more refined, but I think that would be the connection, Beverly, is love of metal.
Yeah, well, they look great. It's
Thank you.
fun to see them come to fruition.
Thank you. It's been a while.
Good for you. Congratulations. Quite a process.
Thank you. Y'all, the background story of this real quick is that my house burned down in 2013 from a lightning strike. And that's how I met John Stewart Jackson and the guys at Sloss, who were working on a banister that had to be repaired in our home. And then I had found some door pulls that I really wanted but couldn't afford. And that's when I decided to learn how to do the lost wax process. So it's been about 7 years.
I hope that you do decide to maintain this line of work within the gallery, because I think that they are great, you know, and you're really kind of like messing with our idea of sculpture and 3D and 2D, and they would work great off the wall too. And they're really nice to see. So I don't think you should just be limited to the door.
Well, and I do really love it just as is against that color, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have anything?
Should I stop sharing?
Sure, you can bring us back.
Okay.
I really like Miriam's comment too, because I feel like there's this dialogue that you guys are all engaging in with the history of painting. And I read this Hal Forrester article where he said like memory was the medium of painting. And I see that being utilized like really methodically with each of your works.
It was definitely a fateful trio, I think. We were meant to be together.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap if nobody's got any other questions or comments. I believe we have 2 new ground floor artists here today. I'm not sure. I know there's definitely Elizabeth Palathi is here, but I think that might be Lauren Woods, and they haven't gotten official welcome emails to announce their that they're joining ground floor, but they are attending today, even though they are off camera. So hello to Elizabeth and Lauren, and we're so excited that you guys are going to be a ground floor artist. Hey, Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you for the welcome. Sorry, I'm off camera because I'm at home and it gets busy. But thank you.
Yeah.
This was great. I really enjoyed this, and your show for the 3 artists showing. For the 3 artists showing, yeah, is beautiful. So I'm gonna go back to quiet, but thank you.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Not at all. You just have to maybe hear some background noise.
But yeah, so let's wrap, and thanks so much to you guys.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, it was so great, and the show is really beautiful. We got 1 more week that it's up. 1 more night, but if anybody wants appointments, you know, we do appointments too, so just let me know. All right, thanks guys.
Bye.
Bye.